You may have seen niche pockets of the internet talking about this game, Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. And honestly, had I not seen a rogue tweet about it, I probably wouldn't have seen it either, since there was very little marketing for this game, as is par for the course for these mostly Eastern appealing titles. This is actually the third game in this series to be released stateside, and the gameplay resembles Pokemon's gameplay in a lot of ways, so you might be wondering if it's worth picking up as a casual fan of Pokemon or just fans of turn-based JRPGs in general, and I'm going to answer that for you. And while we do want to thank Square Enix for giving us a copy of this game as well as the accompanying DLC, I will not hold back on the problems that this game has. I'm Solace, this is Solace and Dread. We produce analytical content as well as reaction videos, primarily focused around Square Enix, Nintendo, and Capcom publications. We'll start with the Solace, or the good. There is a diverse monster roster, and I know that means a lot to a lot of people. The game features a wide variety of monsters with unique abilities, allowing for some creative team building strategies. I'm a casual Dragon Quest fan, having only played through Dragon Quest VIII, but many of the monsters appear to be classic returning monsters with a lot of variants and combinations that seem kind of unfamiliar to me, but I feel like a lot of it is just, monsters that you would be familiar with if you've played the games at all. Then there's also the synthesis system. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot to do with party management and combinations, and that makes for a really fun time experimenting and learning the ins and outs of the skill system and grandparenting and so much more. The gameplay loop is actually super addicting. Figuring out what skills you want, and then, you got to go scout out new monsters, scouting means capturing new monsters, and you level them up to potentially learn new skill trees. It's a lot. It's a lot. But there's a lot of depth, and that's kind of what sets it apart from Pokemon, is the amount of depth. This is actually something that one of our community members pointed out to me, but I think part of the reason that I love playing this game so much is that a lot of the fun was found in the menu and in experimentation. And as a Star Ocean fan, that really appealed to me. Being able to dive in and, try out new combinations and see what you get with, synthesizing each of the monsters. There's a lot of that in Star Ocean's item creation, so it was very much a big appeal to me. Now there's the story. It's interesting to be playing as a central villain from Dragon Quest IV, and it helps you understand how he became who he is. And I like a well-developed villain as much as anybody. It's nice to add depth to existing characters. And while the story isn't anything to write home about, I love the wacky cast of characters you meet along the way. I don't think there's a single character that I met, maybe one. I think there's really only one character that you meet along the way that I didn't like. Despite some cringy dialogue with the English dub, I like the characters. And the exploration on the map is done in kind of a strange manner, but I'm appreciative of how it works. You basically have a tower that is your home base, and it travels to different zones. And then you go through these zones and you explore and fight and scout monsters and look for treasure. I'm super appreciative of this. Since, I've kind of gotten open world burnout between Spider-Man 2 and Tears of the Kingdom, I like a good organized map these days. For the many ways that this game doesn't respect your time, this is one of the ones that it does. And lastly, there's the nostalgic appeal. If you're a fan of Dragon Quest, well, then you're going to appreciate the familiar art styles and the thematic elements. If you're a longtime fan of Dragon Quest, there's really no doubt that you're going to like this game. But therein lies part of the problem, which brings us to the dread. The learning curve is steep for new players, especially those who would be unfamiliar with the monster collecting genre or staples of Dragon Quest in general. You can play the game and get along just fine, but the game is going to be a lot more difficult and more boring if you don't have any semblance of what you're doing. And things aren't very well explained either. I want to keep it surface level, so I'll just say that certain things would be a better experience if you knew more about monster rankings and how synthesis works. And this is one game where it probably wouldn't hurt to hold your hand just a little bit more. Then there's the repetitive gameplay. And some players might find certain aspects of the gameplay, like grinding for monsters and leveling them up to synthesize them, to be kind of repetitive, but that is Dragon Quest, at least part of it. The combat isn't anything crazy new either. Standard turn-based fights, More often than not, you're going to want to speed the battle up and put on auto battle and let the monsters do the fighting for you. This is actually one of the worst parts of the game. So much so that the developers accounted for it by allowing you to increase the battle speed and turn on auto fighting. Some of these areas that you have to go through and the dungeons are long and filled with a ton of enemies, and it's a slog fighting through droves of enemies to get to a boss that you end up smashing like they're made of paper. And the graphics, the visuals, I'm just gonna say they're not great either. I mean, sure, it's a Switch game, but the game is ugly. I mean, not ugly, but it's a little ugly. The art design saves it, you know, but graphically, I mean, come on. You know, if you're playing this, though, you're not picking this game up for the beauty. Just get over that right now. There are times where the game feels like it's moving like 12 frames per second. It's wild. But I'm not going to harp on that for too long. Just know that if you're picking up a Switch exclusive Dragon Quest spinoff, visuals are not going to be your primary sticking point. Gameplay loops are what you're here for. But I got to mention it. It's not the prettiest game. It doesn't run very smoothly. That's just fact. But what is by far the biggest problem with this game is the Day 1 DLC. They added bonus dungeons for leveling and getting items. That's fine. They added an hourly bonus feature. Less fine, but whatever. It gives you some cool stuff. But Molehill? That's bullshit. All of these things that they added are meant to add to ease of use for the game. Like I said in the start of this video, Square Enix gave me a copy of this game with the DLC added to it. And honestly, I could not imagine playing through this game without it. I'm going to keep it surface level because it gets very complicated. But what the Molehill DLC adds is a way to encounter and then capture, or scout, any monster that you fought in the wild or got in your party via synthesis, and it separates them out based on rank. And scouting or capturing monsters is already kind of difficult. So there's a lot of like RNG based to it. So being able to go into this hole and have infinite tries for some of the rarest monsters that you've created is wildly helpful. This feels like it should be part of the game already, and squeezing this in as paid DLC on day one just to make the game a little bit more usable, it feels scummy. It feels kind of like Tales of Arise when they made gold extremely difficult to get, but they sold it to you for $2 a pop. It's the exact same vibe. I hate this formula, and I don't want to see this continue in single-player games. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth as a customer who's paying $60. Luckily, this time I did not have to. Pay to advance in a $60 mostly single-player game is just kind of greedy. Linking it all together, if you're looking for a time sink and you want to get wildly in-depth on the mechanics, or you're just a fan of Dragon Quest or monster collecting games in general, this game is definitely for you. If you do pick it up, I can't recommend watching Hazme's videos enough. This guy puts out the best guides ever on this game. Like, it makes it so much easier watching his videos. I'm still waiting for a healer video from him, though. I'd like that. Hazme, if you ever happen to see this, please give us a healer video. I found myself addicted when I play this game in the same way that I am when I play Star Ocean. But I also tend to forgive it for a lot of stuff, like the grinding, the horrendous visuals that made Scarlet and Violet look good, the quality of life improvements being locked behind paid DLC, probably because I didn't have to pay for them. To say it succinctly, it's a good old-fashioned Dragon Quest experience that they're pretending to sell you for $60, but it's actually like $70, unless you want a much harder time with it. Straight up. That's it from me. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon, and long live the Turtle Kingdom.